Hi, my name is Sadek Drobi, and I'm very happy to be here at Backendless conference. And I would like to talk about how Backendless is making building websites exciting again. So this comes from also a personal experience where, in the past I had to do different websites and different companies or startups I used to work at. And the problem was that there is some kind of framework or proprietary technology that I have to use to build a website. I couldn't use the my preferred framework or programming language, and that's completely changing with backendless. So let's take, for example, this website. It's a Nike website. If you have a look at it, you see that you can break it into different sections, right? There's in the beginning this header with some kind of text and call to action, but you have another section after. We see it here that it has three featured products, and so on and so on. So often, if you look at the web, you see websites are dividing into different sections. Now we can imagine each of these sections are components. Obviously, like we often think about components as these kind of micro components like buttons and stuff like that, but we can also imagine website sections as components. Now the question is, if we break things into components this way, where does the content come from? Okay, like for instance, here we see an image, we see the text, labels of the buttons, all these content. Where do we put it? Now, obviously, we can hard code it, but this is not the best choice for different reasons, and we're going to talk about that. But what we can do, how about if we first say, okay, we need an image, the title, as we said, button label, and button link. How about we define a model for that? So the model will be, okay, I need a hero image of type image. We're defining the type. And then we say the title should be some kind of rich structured text where I need like bold, italic, these kind of things. Subtitle the same. The button label is just simply a text. And the button link, which is a link. Now, from that model, we can imagine getting something generated as an editor, an editor that allows us to kind of write the title, write the subtitle, upload the image, do all these kind of things, right? We get that editor that we can use, or content editors can use, but also we can get an API that allows us to fetch whatever query and fetch whatever content that we actually generated there and wrote, and get that content, query it, and throw it at the component so the component can render. So only by defining the model, we get these two things. Now, this is what often, and we probably heard of this. This is what often is called headless or API-based CMS. So it's a different approach to building websites. Now, by defining that model, we got the editor, we got the API, but also we can get scalability. So basically, you can start small with your website, and then you can start having more users, selling more, and then you will get, the API will be able to scale with that, and even like get into like even more success. And sometimes like recently we handled a lot of traffic that comes from different clients that are on Black Friday, pressure that you need to handle. But you don't, just to define the model, you got all these kind of properties out of the box, and that's really interesting. But something else you can get is a CDN, and a CDN is crucial for a website, especially if you're growing internationally, because you get a fast website that runs everywhere. Basically, whenever someone publishes something, this text that we saw, this image, that will get distributed to different servers around the world, and your website will be able to fetch from these and show it. So your website will be able to run very quickly everywhere in the world, and that's very important to get speed for users when they're checking your website. Something else we can get is availability. Now, if you are developing your own backend, then you have to manage if you have one server, what happens if it goes down? Now you need to have some kind of redundancy. Now, if you choose your provider, your service, right, then they will have availability down in their architecture. So you have that kind of redundancy. So if a server goes down, no problem. They will still have other servers that will take over out of that. You can get also image optimization. We saw that website, the example website, it had different images defined there. So imagine that these images are shown on a Chrome. Well, you will get some kind of optimized format for that. You get WebP, for instance. But if a browser doesn't support that, well, automatically, without doing anything, you will get the right image distributed to that. Also, you get image compression and all these kind of things that allow your website to be way faster. And again, all these properties you get because you define that model that explains what you need for your website, and you get these properties. So that's what backendless is interesting for. Basically, if you get kind of the model, the model is like you have the front end, and usually you used to kind of develop the back end. But now you don't have to develop the back end anymore. What you have to do is actually work on your front end and connect it through an API, okay, and define a model for instance, if you want content management and distribution, and like in our example. But also you can have another it's connected through an API to something for managing users and authorization. Imagine like you want to manage users on your website, and you know that authorization of these users. Well, you can take something like Auth0 and do all the backend management on Auth0, and then use the API to talk to it and allow users in or not. You don't have to write down that backend code. Same thing happens with, you know, kind of shopping cart, for something like Snipcart. You want a shopping cart? Well, you get a service, and then you define a model, and then you start integrating it using an API. Payment, same thing. You want users to pay. You get you get a service like Stripe. And again, Algolia for search. When you want to get like really good search. Search is very hard to get right. And here you define your model, and then you get Algolia indexing your content, and you have a very good search for your website. Same happens for forms. If you want to embed forms and you need to kind of deal with them with the API, same thing. Choose a service, integrate it with your front-end technology, and that's it. That's really nice. It allows you to have all that kind of power without implementing all of these. And the nice thing I really like about this approach is that you are free to choose any framework you want, any modern framework, any programming language. That's your choice. It's not anymore imposed by whatever content management or something else that you're choosing. You have that freedom. But obviously, with freedom comes responsibility. So you have to choose the framework, but then it's up to you to understand the different properties and choose the right framework. So let's go into that kind of choice of framework for our example here. So obviously you have the choice. Then you'll say, okay, how about I choose a modern JavaScript library, for instance. I would do the same. So you would go for React or Vue or Svelte or Angular. And you know, all of them are good choices because they allow you to structure your code in a nice way. They have good community around them. You can break things into components. They're good approaches. The thing you need to be careful about is, since you're doing a website, you need to be very careful about SEO. Now, obviously, a lot of people would tell you that SEO now, you know, bots and crawlers, they already render JavaScript. So if you have a web app, so an app that is running on the browser, like all the example of libraries that I mentioned, Vue, React, all these kind of things, they run on the browser. They are JavaScript apps that run on the browser. The crawlers, what they are interested in is the actual HTML, right? They need to see the HTML, read the content, and say, okay, I understand now this content and this structure, let me index it. Now, if your app or like website is running on JavaScript, you probably know that the crawler will not be able to see right away the HTML. In that case, it has to run the JavaScript app. Now, in the past, it wasn't possible. Now, there are more and more crawlers running the JavaScript. There are some people that argue that you get deprioritized, or if your website is not exactly very fast, the JavaScript app, then you'll not get indexing done right. So the question is, can we be on the safe side and yet use these kind of modern frameworks and libraries? And the answer is yes. There are different strategies for getting this right. So let's talk maybe about the strategies here. So if we choose React or Vue, you have different strategies to kind of get the SEO right. So basically what you want to do is, even if you have a JavaScript app, whenever a crawler or a bot like Google will try to request your website, you want to give it the rendered HTML right away. No, not give it the JavaScript basically. And there are different strategies, and they are kind of different. They try to do the same thing in different ways. You have Next, which is server rendering, and you have Gatsby, which is static site generation, so at build time. And the same thing you got on top of Vue. For people that prefer Vue, you got Nux and you get Gridsome. So let's talk about the differences of these two main approaches: server-side rendering and static site generation. They're the main. Now there are things that are like do almost both, or something in between. But let's talk about these kind of different strategies. So if we talk about server-side rendering, what happens here is that you have a React app, let's imagine, and you get a request. Okay, now that request goes into a server. Now the server will take your app, your components, and it will render them. It will execute the app, and it will get the HTML, and it will deliver the HTML. So it runs your front end app on the server to get the rendering HTML. Now from now on, when you are in the browser, you click on links, it will start behaving as a client side app. So it will render in the browser, but only when the crawler is like requesting directly. When you or when you type the URL on the browser for the you're typing it and you hit enter, you get the rendered right away. So you get very good speed, because everything gets rendered right away on the server, and you get the result right away, instead of like having the browser figure out things and running JavaScript, which is pretty fast. And on top of that, obviously you can add caching, so that you don't have to generate the pages every time you get a user. From the other side, static site generation, what it does is that it builds everything at build time. So you hit, like, you can have a webhook or something, and whenever there's some new content on publish, it will go ahead and build every single page. Now what happens there that you can think about is it will take time, because it's building the whole website. Now when there is someone that will basically build the whole website, and it will generate basically HTML files, right, that you can host on any file system. Now whenever someone is writing the URL and hitting enter, what you get is right away the HTML. Now from then on, if you kind of click on links, it will actually function as a client app, but with some optimization, because the different frameworks do optimization to get that even fast, even after the first request. So mainly, they're very similar, but they're different in the way they execute things. Both, they kind of render the HTML right away, so you get it on the browser already rendered, and then they function as web apps. But one of them, it will spend time on each request, basically, and then you can cache it so that you don't spend time there. So the time investment, like if you have fresh content, then it will have to build that particular page. Now, Next, for instance, is adding strategies so that they can pre-fetch the content and pre-cache on some event that they know, okay, there's fresh content. Before anyone talks about it, let me already generate that cache, so no one has to pay that kind of extra latency of generating fresh content. On the other side, you pay the time on the build time. So it will take longer to build, because you have to build all the pages. Now, obviously, they're working on making that build more like quicker and getting some kind of preview mechanisms, but you get the idea. So that's what one of the things that we talk about is how to kind of generate and how to optimize for SEO still by using your favorite framework or library. Now, you also get to choose your API. Now there are preferences of API. There is the REST API, which is the classic one. Most people maybe know about it. You kind of use HTTP, you make a GET, and you get a query, and then you get a response. Often the response gets in the JSON. Well, very pretty standard and obvious. Now there's another approach that is getting like it's very popular nowadays is GraphQL, which is it's a query that allows you to kind of dig deeper into relations. And I like it because it's the interesting thing about it is that uh, website content is also in a way it's like there are relations inside it. So basically, if for our example, you say I'm getting the page, and then I want to kind of get the product, and then for the product I want to get the category, you can go navigate and say fetch all the content with one query instead of doing several queries, which makes a lot of sense. Now, with the problem, maybe some people will find it a bit long to write GraphQL queries because you need to specify every single field that you need. So you have to be really exhaustive about things that you actually need. Whereas with REST, you just query thing and it gives you everything that it has. Now that comes at a price. You might get a bigger payload than what you want. So you get a bigger JSON because there are things that you don't exactly need. But often with websites, when you define content, you can optimize so that you have only the field that you need. So this is the thing. GraphQL allows you to get this kind of relations and deep queries, but you have to specify everything. REST is more simpler, but you might end up with big payloads. So these are the differences between these two. So we talked about like this kind of freedom that it brings you, but it also changes your responsibilities as a web site developer. So it's not anymore only about writing that kind of website. It's about making different things. And one thing that will change for you, that you'll be responsible of modeling. So we saw in the beginning, you had to kind of figure out what kind of content you need and define the model. Now, by defining that model, you're doing two things. You're defining the model for the API, so it talks about code and how you want to structure your code, and how you want to your queries to be performant. But you're also doing another thing. You're defining your editor's UX, user experience, because you're defining the editor, right? Whenever you say the title or that, then the editor will be based on that. And that's very important because these two aspects, they're not always compatible. So you might have things that are interesting for your code structure that might not be very good for your UX. So taking this example, if we are modeling these things, as a developer, I will tend to try to break things into more relations, relational database or stuff like that. It's more interesting, it's structured, we developers, we like structure. So I would tend to say, okay, this section is a document on its own, the page, and then each of the components is another document. And for each of this featured product, I will make a document as well. I will link to another document, and so on and so on. So you get this kind of recursive model where you get from one page into the several components, and for each component in several components, and so on and so on. So if you model the content this way, it might make sense for code and for your queries and for your structure of your code. But it will be a nightmare for an editor. They have to click to be able to edit the smallest thing. They have to click and then click and then click and then click until they get to the right level. That's not great. Now, and you see now they're not compatible because from one side you try to optimize your code, but you got your editor's head spinning because of these kind of extra clicks. And that's where your responsibility comes into play, is that you have to think about something like how can I make that kind of model that is good for both, or good at least for the best part of both. So in my case here, I would use, instead of like breaking things into much smaller things, I would favor maybe UX here, and I would say, okay, let me write something that is simple for the editor. So I will write. I will try my best to do a document that correspond to a page. So a page is a document. If you see, if the editor is seeing a page, well, they can go to the corresponding document and will see everything there and will start editing right away. So and some headless CMSs provide, like we provide, for instance, slices which correspond to components, so you can edit them right away right away inside the page without having to go deeper. So use these kind of things to make the editing experience nicer for editors. So basically, what we talked about here is that this new approach, the back-endless approach, allows you to get that kind of more, you get more powerful, right? We saw that you start by doing your front end and you say like, I need this kind of type of thing. I need search. Okay, let me get search from a service. I need, let's say, users to manage users. Okay, I get a service for that. So very quickly, with less effort, with less time, less investment, you can get different aspects implemented in your website without having to implement them. And you get them to be scalable, you get like different properties, CDNs, all these kind of things. You want forms, you integrate forms, and so on. And there are, examples are a lot of this kind of service that you can implement. And the good thing, you implement them by defining them all and then connecting with the API. And that's really cool. The other thing that the backendless is changing is that you can choose your favorite framework. So no more, choices that are based on other aspects than your preference. You can choose. We saw you can choose React, Vue frameworks on top of that. You can choose Laravel. You can choose I don't know, Node.js, Express, simple things. Anything you want, you can change. You can choose, and that's really nice. It allows you to get back the choice, the control of your choice of your framework. But you have your role will change with that. How to build the architecture, how to kind of do modeling. There are a lot of aspects that you have to be dealing with and caring about that you didn't have to care about in the beginning. So first, you have to deal with your designer to know how can I break my website into sections, into components, and then you have to care about the modeling. How can I get the modeling right for performance, for my code structure? How can I get it right for the editors, UX? So you have to design the UX for your editors, but also you have to choose a tooling. You are the one to say which to talk about, to search for which search engine you're going to integrate, which you have choice, and then you have to choose from there which headless CMS should I be choosing, which are the ones that bring the properties that I need for my project. You analyze your project and you understand which ones, right? And you are the one that is coding the front end, which is the fun part. But it gives you all these kind of responsibilities. So that's it for me. I hope that gives you kind of an overview of backendless and all these kind of things and how is it changing building websites. My name is Sadek Ruby. I work for Prismic.io. We provide a headless CMS for your website, and I'm very happy like I could participate to this talk, and I hope I gave you enough information about the topic. Thank you.